Georgia's coast has 100 miles of shoreline and contains some of our state's most spectacular resources. Join us as we explore the natural history of our coast and the recreational opportunities it provides. Coming up next.
Captain Jean Pleasance knows her way around the fabled golden salt marshes of coastal Georgia. She has been providing tours here for over 15 years. Salt marsh tours are popular here because, well, there's plenty of salt marsh. Georgia's 450,000 acres of marshland represents about a third of all salt marsh on the eastern seaboard. Salt marshes are located between barrier islands and the mainland. Where a river meets the sea, an estuary is formed. Captain Jean took us down the Hampton River and through beautiful tidal creeks of Sea Island and Little St. Simon's Island.
Look at that tide move us in. We'll start here by going through some of the general things about the salt marsh as an introduction to what's happening out here. The marsh provides habitat for a number of species, and it acts as a nursery for others. And that nursery function is most important. The estimate is that if we did not have marshes on a worldwide basis, that we would not have 70% of the different kinds of food fish that we have on our plates worldwide. And that's just the food fish. That doesn't count what we don't eat. So this is a valuable place. It also has a high recreational value, and that's what we're after today. The common name of this grass is cordgrass. It used to be used for making cordage or rope. People have found better things to use, so it's not used for that anymore. Its other name, its scientific name, is Spartina alterniflora. Now this grass can survive here because of a couple of adaptations it's made. It sends the excess salt up that central reed, and it breathes it out through the stomata, or the little openings on the blades of grass. You can see the salt crystals shining on it.
The salt marsh acts as a nursery for a myriad of sea creatures. Many get their start in the marsh before they move out to the ocean, where they live out their adult lives.
I'll run through the life cycle of the shrimp so you can see how that works. They're born in the ocean. They come in here in their larval state. They spend 4 to 6 months in here, where there's such a rich food supply in these estuaries. They double in size and weight approximately every 30 days, and then they swim back out to the ocean. They send in the next generation of kids.
That food supply also benefits other creatures of the coast. Numerous pelagic, wading, and shorebirds can be spotted here. The Audubon Society estimates that over 250 bird species can be seen on, in, and around the coastal waters of Georgia.
At high tide, we see the wading birds up on the top of the marsh. At low tide, we see the wading birds as well as the smaller birds on the sandbars. We'll see the terns. We'll see some black skimmers, several egrets and herons. And another bird down here that has a rather humorous name is the Lord Godbird. When the pileated woodpecker calls, it makes such a raucous noise that people sometimes hear that and say, Lord God, what is that? And that's why he's called the Lord Godbird. Well, here's an osprey nest right over here in that treetop. We have a number of osprey nests out here in the marsh. The male osprey is a rather large bird. He has a wingspan of up to 6 feet. And when they mate for life. Their lifespan is about 25 years. I understand the record, last I read, was around 31 years. They have time to build some huge nests. Some of their nests weigh as much as 1,000 pounds. When the osprey fishes, it goes feet first into the water, and it always turns the fish around so it's facing into the wind. The courting ceremony of the osprey also involves fish. When the male osprey wants to propose to the ladybird that he'd like to spend his 25 years or so of life with, he catches a nice fish and he offers her the fish, and she looks it over very closely, probably to find out what sort of provider he'll be. If she eats the fish, that's her way of saying I do, and if she won't eat his fish, that means she doesn't want him or his fish either. It is a place of beauty. I never get tired of it, of of looking at the birds and seeing the water move and watching the sunlight on the water. It's a lovely place, a truly lovely place.
The stunning display of the sun rising to give light to a new day on the Atlantic coast is one of the very reasons that so many people choose to live near and visit often our Georgia coast. As the sun peeks out from the sparkling water, it crosses the sky, illuminating the gentle waves of the Atlantic. It glows over the dunes and sends rays of light through the branches of the live oaks to the floor of the maritime forest. And finally, it drops behind the salt marshes, coloring them golden with slanted beams of light. This cycle creates a feeling as though this natural magnificence has been here since the beginning of time. But the Georgia coast was formed recently in geological time. The older barrier islands of Georgia's coast were formed 60 to 80,000 years ago, but our more eastern-lying islands are just 4 to 5,000 years old. That's very young when compared to the age of our North Georgia landscape, which is over 200 million years old. But the coast is not done forming. In a state of dynamic equilibrium, the Georgia coastline is constantly shifting, ruled by the unyielding forces of nature. Below the sunlit shimmering water lies the ocean floor, most of it composed of loose sediments of sand, silt, and mud. Few organisms can live on such shifting bottoms, which comprise nearly 97% of Georgia's ocean floor. Large communities of bottom-dwelling species congregate only where there are protuberances of hard bottom. These areas are the oases of a watery desert. Home to many species of marine fishes and plants, the live-bottom reefs off the coast of Georgia are unique because they are home to both temperate and tropical species. Live bottom reefs only represent about 2 to 3% of Georgia's ocean floor, but they support entire food chains. From the minuscule invertebrates that live on the rock outcroppings, to the mighty sport fish that egg Georgia's anglers on, to the endangered loggerhead sea turtle, who consider this a good place to find both food and refuge. Sea turtles are ideally suited to life in the ocean. They have flippers instead of legs, and large, hard shells for protection against most predators. While sea turtles live most of their life in the ocean, female sea turtles use the beach for nesting. Every summer, female sea turtles struggle to drag their huge bodies onto the very beach on which they themselves were hatched, completing a remarkable circle of life. A sea turtle is not ready to nest until she's 20 to 25 years old. The beach that she hatched on may well be a very different place when she returns. Humans have developed a great deal of the Georgia coast. We have quite literally built our dream houses and luxury hotels on shifting sands. Dynamic changes in the shape and size of barrier islands occur constantly, especially along the sides of the islands adjacent to inlets or narrow bodies of water between the islands. Generally, the southern ends of the islands tend to accrete or build up with deposited sand, while the northern ends are often interspersed with erosion. The intertidal beach is wet, and its size is subject to the tidal range and slope of the beach. Georgia's beaches have a very high tidal range, the highest on the Atlantic seaboard, and a gradual slope, so the intertidal beaches of Georgia can extend seaward as much as 1/4 of a mile. This strip of ecosystem, subject to much movement by wind and water currents, is highly unstable and therefore a hostile environment for plants and seashore life. The majority of residents are found either in burrows or interspersed among the wet sand grains. The amount of the visiting life, however, can be quite numerous. Visiting shorebirds like the aptly named sandpiper can be seen crowding the beach, feasting on the countless crustaceans and small worms found in and among the sand. Horseshoe crabs arrive on the beach to spawn during the new or full moon high tide. Males patrol the intertidal beach at the water's edge, waiting for a female to emerge from the surf. Arriving females are usually pursued by a number of males, all smaller than she is, but eventually one male will win out over the other. The couple will remain together as the female climbs up the beach to the high tide line, where she will dig a shallow nest and deposit her eggs. The horseshoe crab has inhabited the earth since before the age of dinosaurs. The name crab, however, is misleading, as the horseshoe crab is actually more closely related to the spider. Rows of marsh wrack are often left along the high tide line, washed there by waves. Ghost crab burrows can often be seen above the high tide line, but ghost crabs themselves are most easily seen at night while foraging in the marsh wrack. Ghost crabs are omnivorous and will eat other crabs, clams, insects, vegetation, and detritus.
While you're on the coast, you might want to try saltwater fishing. Coming up next, we'll fish for red drum in the surf and find out what special equipment is needed.
The Georgia coast is an excellent setting for some great surf fishing. One popular sport fish is the red drum, also known as redfish and spot-tail bass. So popular, in fact, that 15 years ago their population was at an all-time low. Intensive management and strict limits were put in place to assist its comeback. We joined some friends from the Department of Natural Resources to help learn about these magnificent fish.
We're here with Spud Woodward, senior marine biologist with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, and we're in a tidal zone here. Spud,
Yeah.
tell us exactly where we are and what we're doing today.
We're on Pelican Spit, which is a sandbar at the mouth of the Hampton River, which is located between Little St. Simons and Sea Island, and the southeast part of the Georgia coast. And we've come to this particular place in time because this is the season of the year when big adult red drum, commonly referred to as bull reds, roam this surf looking for food to fatten up before wintertime. And to scientists like us, it's our chance to get our hands on them so that we can learn a little bit more about their life cycle. And what we've got for bait is your basic old mullet, cut mullet, which is a pretty popular bait in coastal Georgia for a variety of things. But a lot of folks, their eye catches this hook. This hook is much different than the normal hook that you see. It's a circle hook. The circle hook first was used in commercial fishing, but it's become very, very popular in recreational fishing because it's a really efficient way to catch fish, particularly for amateurs, because you don't have to set the hook. The hook sets itself, which is a hard thing for people to believe, but it sets itself. The reason that we like it, and another reason it's so popular, is because when you catch a fish with this, most of the time they're caught right in the corner of the mouth. So for fishing like we're doing, which the object is to catch the fish, measure it, tag it, and turn it back healthy, that keeps us from gut hooking these fish. And for a recreational fisherman that's interested in catch and release or releasing fish that are too big or too small, it allows them to be a good fishing manager and turn that fish back, as healthy as it can be. They come in a variety of sizes now, and thin wire and heavy wire. All right, what we've got here is a very specialized sinker. It's called a Sputnik or a storm sinker or a bomber. And, it's pretty obvious that it's a little different than the pyramid sinkers that you normally see people use for surf fishing. And in most circumstances, a pyramid sinker is fine. But on a day when you've got a lot of current running along the beach, a storm sinker will just sort of roll, and eventually your bait ends up back on the beach, not where you want it to be. Because the key to this fishing is keeping your bait out there in the strike zone. So the neat thing about this is you pitch it out there, give it a couple of tugs, and these little prongs bury up in the sand and hold it. But when a fish strikes, or when you need to bring it back in to check the bait, on a real strong tug, they just toggle back over and break loose like that. And then it just pulls back in. And then when you get ready to put it back out, you just toggle it back up, set them back into their little grooves, and you're back in business again.
That's a great little system.
Because a lot of times the best fishing is when that surf is really churning and booming and breaking, and most of the time when people won't be out here. Like us, we don't have a lot of company today.
And what are we going to do? Look for location of the cast.
And what we try to find is, to most people when they look at off the beach at all this breaking water, it doesn't have a lot of features to it. But there are little deeper areas, little troughs and stuff that'll fill in first, and those are the highways that the fish use to get in to that surf area. And the reason they're in here is because there's a lot of bait, a lot of things that they like to eat that's all churned up and disoriented by this surf. And those places are the first pathway for them to get in. And so that's the place where you want to put your bait, because that's where they're most likely to encounter your bait. But anything that's big, we're going to tag and release.
Okay. Well, I assume this is typical casting technique then?
Right.
And I'm going to look to try to get it right over in that slough or that quiet spot between these breakers right here and that next bunch, right?
That's right. When you come back, you leave just enough drag that there'll be some resistance when the fish takes it, but not so much so they can pull the fence back. This is a game of patience, like most fishing. You'll know when the fish takes it, because it'll be pretty obvious when it happens, and then it's just a matter of the same old basic pump and reel that you use in every other style of fishing.
And we may run into other species out here, correct?
Right. There's sharks out here, stingrays, spotted sea trout, whiting. There's a lot of things. This larger hook size eliminates some of the smaller things, but you're still subject to run across a shark or something like that.
Okay. Well, see what happens.
That's right. Put it bait in the water. Places are not always easy to get to. We found that out already, and that getting there, as the old saying goes, is half the fun. And in this business, it really is. And of course, getting back from there can also be half the fun. These places cover up with water most of these sandbar areas, and when you have a high tide push by a northeast wind like we've got, they definitely get submerged, and they get submerged pretty quickly. So it's pretty challenging to get in these places, catch your fish, tag your fish, measure your fish, and then get back. I tell people a lot of times with a degree of seriousness that when we get back alive, it's a successful trip.
As part of the management effort to save these marvelous creatures, the harvest limits are a little different than for most species. Not only is there a minimum length, there is also a maximum length. This is referred to as a slot limit. To be legal, red drum must be at least 14 inches long and not longer than 27 inches. The daily creel limit is 5.
Well, the redfish is the second most popular saltwater sport fish in coastal Georgia. And because of its popularity, it's important that we manage this fishery resource for the future. And unlike a lot of fishes, the redfish matures fairly late in its life. It has to be in the 4th or 5th year of life. And most of the time that it's living inside the estuary and the rivers and the creeks, and when it's most vulnerable to fishing, it's immature. So that creates a management challenge, because a lot of the fish that we manage with size limits, those fish reach maturity before they're harvested.
That's a shark. Oh, shoot. Yep, there he goes. Another shark. Keep hoping for a red drum. He just took it. He was burning line. And then he just decided that he'd had enough. Certainly makes for some excitement, though. Didn't take all the tackle, though. Just took the hook. That's good. Makes it a little easier to re-rig.
And in most fall seasons, we catch and tag, around 150 fish. It's also, oftentimes we capture some of the fish that we've tagged the previous years, which gives us great insight into what these animals are doing in time and space. And the thing that's been most revealing is that we've caught fish right back in the same places that we've tagged them. They're homebodies, and that means that Georgia has a population of red drum that's indigenous to its waters. And those fish don't make big migrations to the north or to the south, or they're our fish. So in terms of selling conservation to anglers, we've been able to show through our tagging that, hey, it's your fish that you're protecting. And so when you release those fish, when you abide by the size limits and the creel limits, you're going to get the benefits of it. Your fish aren't just disappearing and going somewhere else to be caught.
Besides obeying the size and creel limits, there are a few other things Georgians might consider to help our fish population stay healthy and numerous.
An estuary is a mixing of fresh and salt water, and it provides vital habitat for just a myriad of species. So what people need to remember is what they do in Athens and what they do in Atlanta and what they do in Macon makes a difference down here. I tell people that all the time when I bring them out to these types of areas and say, the water molecules floating under this boat may have come out of a sprinkler head at Grant Field in Atlanta, or they may have run off of a parking lot in Athens. All of that comes down here. And if we're going to protect coastal Georgia, it's got to be done beginning inland and then working down. I mean, it's all connected together. We've got a tremendous area down here that's very complicated, but if we don't have water and fresh water in the right amounts, things are going to get very complicated down here for these little creatures that are trying to live here. And we're struggling to try to deal with the immensity of all this, and it is a little intimidating, but we work persistently at it, trying to, and what we're doing with tagging these fish is an incremental step towards learning a little bit about this mystery of all of these things that interconnect with each other.
Spud, thanks so much for working with us on this trip this time. I had a great time out on the water. That was a kind of fishing that I'd never done before. A little science and a little recreation at the same time.
Right. In this case, we did a lot of recreation and not a whole lot of science, but next time it'll be better.
Well, thanks to you and your colleagues for working with us.
It's a pleasure, as always.
We'll see you next time.
Okay.
To get around by boat on the coast, you need to learn about the Intracoastal Waterway. Coming up, a lesson on how to use it.
The Atlantic Intracoastal Waterway is a series of federally maintained navigation channels that extend from Norfolk, Virginia to Miami, Florida. When using the Intracoastal Waterway, you'll need to know how to read channel markers.
We have two different types of channel markers here. First, the Intracoastal Waterway, and we have the shipping channel markers. They're both marked by red and green boards or cans, buoys that float in the water. The Intracoastal Waterways are also marked by a little yellow mark on them, either triangle or square, to match the marker, and that indicates that you are in the Intracoastal Waterway. The regular channel markers look identical, but they do not have the yellow marks on them, the little triangles or the squares. They're also numbered. The numbers on them are not for mileage purposes to tell you how far you've traveled. They're for location purposes. You can look at the number on there and call for help and tell them the number of the nearest marker, and the Coast Guard or DNR or whoever can look on a chart and get that number and find out exactly where you're at. The way it's set up is when you're traveling south in the Intracoastal Waterway, you want to keep reds to your right. In the shipping channels, you're running primarily east and west. When you're traveling, returning from sea, you'll run red right returning.
Tim reminds us of the most important safety rules to remember.
On the coastal waters, it's basically just like it is anywhere else as far as the laws go. Here we enforce the 100-foot law pretty vigorously. Anytime you come within 100 foot of any stationary object in the water, anything sitting still, not moving, you have to drop down to idle speed. Anytime you need help, you can get on channel 16 VHF, call for help, and somebody will hear you. You use that channel just to call for help. The Coast Guard monitors channel 16 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Before you go out, make sure that your fire extinguisher's charged and your life jackets, you've got enough for everybody on board and they're the right size.
Georgia has some wonderful opportunities for boating. If you'd like to learn more about boating in Georgia, visit this website.